Hello there. It is Wednesday, November 19th, 2025, and it's 6:21 p.m., and I'm in Palm Springs. I'm at their visitor center, and I just had this very long conversation, nearly an hour, with a man named Steve, who was very, very drunk, respectfully. I was thinking I would release it as a clip, but it's an hour long, so I'm not sure if it's that interesting. I personally lost interest at a certain point, and I was like, man, I can't believe I'm still recording, but I'm panning for gold here. And there were some moments, but not sure. I'm putting it in Notebook LM, so we'll see what kind of output it has with that. It named it something pretty appropriate. What did it say? Skateboarding, biking, and beers, a drunken conversation. So yeah, we'll see how much of an energy drain that might have been. Hopefully not too much, but yeah, man, quite a day. I think it was something like 72 miles, which, I was thinking, yesterday, and I guess maybe days leading up to today, I was like, I could see myself doing some big days, and I still think there are some big days in the forecast for me, especially because today I got to experience something very, very rare indeed, which was a tailwind and a downhill, which is pretty crazy. Those are not things that I have usually been able to talk about as something that I've had access to experientially, So that was pretty awesome for like the last 10 miles to be just pushed by the wind and pushed by gravity right in the direction I wanted to go. Man, eastbound is pretty sweet. It's almost like I'm supposed to go back. But yeah, my dude, I got a lot of things on my list. I don't think I probably have the energy to go through all of them. Maybe I do. Let me see. Oh, geez. Yeah, I don't know about all that. That's a lot of stuff, my dude. Just little thoughts throughout the day about things. And I was hoping that this visitor center would be a good spot to possibly bed down for the evening, but after getting a little bit more acquainted with some of the locals, I'm like, well, this place seems like it's got a lot of foot traffic and a lot of people who are kind of just like, they're not up to no good, but I don't know what they're up to. So it's like, well, I might have to look around a little bit harder and figure out a better plan for the evening, because I would enjoy having a nice night. You know what I'm saying? I think that you do. But yeah, man, I guess I'll go over the chronology, and then we'll get to where we are, and then I'll see what I have room for left cognitively before, I'm kind of in the mood where I just like kind of want to secure my spot for tonight, which I guess is a good place to start for me recounting yesterday. So yesterday, it was interesting. When did I make that clip? I was at that gas station waiting for the weather to improve, and I had been aiming for a park, and it was about 1.5 miles down the road. So I went to the park, but it was really well lit, and it was still being actively used by soccer players, and there wasn't really a good spot to set up and feel good about it. I just kind of felt like people were bound to walk by me at some point, whether going to the bathroom or leaving to go back to their car or whatever. I just couldn't find a spot that felt like a real nook. I like to, if I can, I like to sleep against at least one wall, and then have my bike right. Basically, I'll put my bike in front of the wall, and then I'll sleep in front of my bike so that, I can protect it a little bit if need be. And I just couldn't find a place like that at the park. And then I remembered that I had gone under an overpass, and I was like, well, maybe tonight will be the night that I finally live out one of my bucket list items, which would be to sleep under an overpass, which I think I would be fine with. I know that that can be very loud, and loud things can bother people. But I'll have to get to where I finally ended up, because that usually isn't the case for me. I kind of find it to be soothing, like the sound of traffic. It's like kind of a white noise kind of situation for me, especially if it's pretty constant, which, I was underneath like I-15 or something like that. And then the road that was right next to it was also very busy. So I went over to this area, and it was it was very difficult to actually get up to the underpass, the under area, and I had to shoulder my bike and then pull it through all these scrub bushes and stuff like that. It's pretty messy. I still have some errant nettles in my bike stuff and on my bags and things like that. But I got up there, and I quickly found out that basically underneath the overpass, it was just like a channel for water to run, and since it had just recently rained, it was just covered with wet mud. And so I got really dirty exploring around that area, and I was like, okay, this sucks. Like, I need to figure out something else. And I found a cemetery, and I was like, all right, well, I've slept at cemeteries before. That can be a good option. So I rolled over to the cemetery. Cemetery was completely locked down, had gates, it had fences, barbed wire fences, which I was like, that seems, are you keeping people in or are you keeping people out, my dude? And so I was kind of walking around the perimeter because, of course, you got to look at it. And I found that there was this area behind the cemetery that was, it seemed like kind of a walking path, probably something used by transient people. But pretty well established. And so I walked back there for a bit, and I was like, this is definitely flat enough. And although it's definitely a little bit moist back here, it's not like actively muddy. It's just like a bunch of debris from like trees and stuff like that. So I found a little spot, and I was right next to the interstate and the cemetery, and I had a fence behind me, and so bed down for the night. But as I kind of got, set up for the evening and had all my stuff where it needed to be, I started to think, because I was like, I think I'm getting a little soft. I think I got a little soft with my time in LA and then time with family friends. Not that there's nothing bad about that, but for sure I was just like, this kind of does suck more than what the alternative could be, which is like not being here. So I was like, okay, well, I'm listening to my organismic being here. I'm sensing that there's a little bit of protest about this. It doesn't feel quite as fun as it usually does, and that could be a factor of me, getting back into the swing of like just finding places to sleep as a fun exercise that takes a little bit of time to re-sharpen the skill of, I mean, to be fair, my body also feels a little bit more worn down by the day than I feel like it typically would when I was more in the groove of biking a lot, 70 miles a day, with the momentum, it kind of dissipates quickly. An over-sharpened blade can become brittle. Or that's not really what I'm saying. It's more like an unused blade can become rusty. And so I started thinking about my logistics, my future plans, and I was like, well, like, there's nothing romantic in this moment when it's like wet and cold and, all my gear is getting dirty and stuff like that is like particularly attractive about continuing to do as I move forward. So what can I start to think about, not necessarily as a compromise, but as like a way to continue having fun on this trip without feeling like I might be headed for any kind of burnout. I don't want to burn out and get to a point where like I'm just straight up not having a good time. I want to continue having a good time as long as possible. And so I was like, okay, well, trains are an acceptable form of transportation in this journey. And so I was like, well, what do I want to do, though, if I were to use a different form of getting back to the East Coast? And I was like, well, I could bike to New Orleans, which I've never been to, and I honestly don't really have any interest in exploring in a meaningful way. But New Orleans is where the Crescent Line, which I've taken many, many times, from Atlanta, north, I guess, only. I've only ever gone north. Well, I have come south from New York City before. But in any case, it's a known quantity. I've taken it to D.C. to hang out with family friends. Shout out to the Finleys. Shout out to my parents, too, by the way. And so I was like, okay, well, so that's an interesting part of the puzzle. And then I started also thinking like, well, my parents, they're going to Indiana for Christmas, and it would be fun to join them in that, especially because I saw a lot of the same family members that they would be seeing during this trip when I went through Indiana. And so I was like, okay, well, if I aim to do that, if I took a train from New Orleans to Toccoa, which is a station that's very close to my parents' house, then I'd only be 40 miles away from them. And this plan started to get me a little bit more excited about the idea of what the eventual future would look like, And it's also 500 miles-ish closer, and so I'd be able to fit the timeline in. So as things sit right now, my general new aim is New Orleans, which is 2,000 miles from here, which would be about 4 weeks. If you do the napkin math, it basically breaks down to 28 and a half days to get from here to there. And then it's a 14-hour train ride from Louisiana to Toccoa, which arrives at 1:30 in the morning. And I do have to say, there is a romantic part of me that really likes the idea, because I was like, man, where would I sleep in Toccoa? I was like looking around at where things are in that area. And I was like, well, weather permitting, it doesn't really matter if it's cold. I can deal with that. But as long as it's not raining or snowing when I arrive there, which would be, mid-December, there's certainly a part of me that is interested in biking from Toccoa at 1:30 in the morning back to my parents' house, and then just sleeping on their deck once I arrive for a couple of hours until sunrise. And I was like, that sounds like a romantic and fitting way to end the journey, And they probably don't want to hear any more about that because it sounds scary, probably. But for me, I was like, that probably would be one of the best times you could bike on some of those roads up in that area, like 1:30 in the morning. And I've never done anything like that. Well, I have done things like that. I did a 200-mile ride once, and that started at 6 a.m. and that ended at 1 a.m. So that was 20 hours of biking, which is that's about right too, because on a trip like that, 10-mile-an-hour average is probably a pretty reasonable expectation to have for the effort. So yeah, that's kind of where I'm sitting now. Like I'm like, I don't have to rush to get there. I would definitely enjoy getting there soon, but it's nice to have a firmer destination in mind and something else to have as a reason to get there. Like my birthday is in mid-December, and then Christmas with family sounds fun. Indiana's a cool state. If it wasn't so cold, I would be aiming for that and not, Texas and all these other more southern warm states. So, yeah, I'm pretty jazzed on that idea. And even though I did all of my digital needfuls last night, which kind of robbed me of the experience and satisfaction this morning, which I won't replicate if I can help it, I was very glad to have had that time to think about things and kind of reevaluate where I'm heading and why. I kind of feel like, getting back on the bike on a rainy and cold day certainly is fertile ground for wondering what my why is. I just looked at the time; it was 12 minutes, so I'm a little off. I guess I'm rushing. But yeah, redefining my why. I felt like I did that today. Or I guess last night rather. And more resolute with like where I'm going and the reasons behind it. And I feel good about that. And so I woke up really early this morning. I was on my bike, packed up and ready to head on to the next step at 5:30. And I know that it was before 5:30 because my alarm went off while I was listening to something and pushing my bike out from this little crevice that I had found, I'm going to definitely be looking for a similar crevice tonight. But yeah, went to a Starbucks, and I was kind of intending to only grab a drink and then go over to McDonald's, but it was kind of like, I don't know, I saw that they had plugs, and I knew that they would be much more apt to give me as much water as I wanted. And so I stayed there for maybe an hour before going over to McDonald's, which, lo and behold, had no plugs and no like public access to water. So, in fact, the woman charged me for water, which was kind of crazy. I think that's the first time I've actually been charged when I've asked for cups of water. And it's unfortunate because, if they had the machine, I wouldn't have to bother them at all about it. But then for me to get like 2 cups of large water, it was like $2. And I was like, well, there are some things I will miss about California, but by and large, the way that its commerce works is not going to be one of them. If I was doing van life or something in here, I'd probably be even more upset with how much more expensive the gas is and stuff. It's like twice the price as most of the places I feel like I've been through. But in any case, so yeah, Starbucks was great. McDonald's was, it was par. It was close to subpar, but par enough, And then, I was like, well, I guess it's time to go, my dude. And so I hit the road before 9. I was kind of setting myself up to possibly do a big day today. I was like, there's a part of me that would be excited about the idea of doing a century. But then, throughout the course of the day, I was like, well, I am getting a little caught up, I can tell, in what I want to do versus what I need to do. I'm getting a little bit too invested in the number and a little bit less invested in what that's actually going to mean in order to accomplish that. I mean, I guess I probably could have been closer to 100 miles if I hadn't stopped and talked to Steve. It was just fine. In the grand scheme of things, I'd rather speak with him for an hour than continue aimlessly down the road for 20 more miles or whatever it is. 30, I guess, at this point. So that was fine enough. And I certainly don't want to get in that mindset, which I know is an easy trap for me to fall into, of just like, again, valuing that number over the experience that it would also provide or present. And I'm also not entirely sure when I'm going to get to a point where I am in a service gap, which I would think is somewhat inevitable since I'm getting closer to like the parts of Arizona that are kind of in line with parts of Nevada. I'm just kind of assuming that the infrastructure is going to be somewhat similar. However, I did get on I-10 today, which was great. I was like, okay, awesome. I've kind of made it. Like being on the I-10 corridor, being in the I-10 corridor is like kind of the thing I've been tentatively aiming for since some point in LA. And I was just like, I was actually on it today. So that's definitely some marked progress, my dude. But yeah, so I left that McDonald's and just kind of, all I did today was aim for Starbucks that were 20 or 30 miles away. So I did a push, and I guess I climbed like nearly 3,000 feet today, but the mountains were so gently graded that I really didn't notice it. Like, it was kind of shocking to even look at my bike computer and see that I had done a couple thousand feet of climbing. So I was like, well, I don't really know when that happened. I wouldn't be able to pinpoint it throughout my day. It was just so easy. And mindless, just very low grades for very long times. I mean, even getting here, the last 10-mile push, which was more of like, not even a push, it was more of just like a coast, really. Like I said, it's all downhill, super slow, and tailwind to boot, so I'm not going to complain about that. And yeah, went to a second Starbucks. Did I go to 3 though? I did. Okay, yeah. So I went to a second Starbucks and was able to dry my gear for a little bit, which I was pretty happy about because the dew point, if I understand dew point correctly, which I'm not sure that I do, pun intended. Shout out to my dude Travis, by the way. I think that basically I hit the saturation point for all of my gear to basically just create its own wetness because of the moisture in the air at like 4 a.m. this morning. And I was certainly, anytime I would wake up, which was several times last night, I would kind of feel the outside of my sleeping bag, and it just felt like it was getting more and more moist, and the humidity went up a lot overnight. It went from like 44% to like 90%. And so I definitely woke up wet. And, I don't like having wet gear. It smells bad. It's not the same level of thermal insulation, and it's just generally an amateur move, So the second Starbucks, I was able to dry things out a lot more, and have a Wendy's double chicken sandwich, which was nice, and top off my waters, top off my batteries. I also was pretty diligent all day about charging my stuff just to make sure it stayed at the highest level of readiness. In fact, I'm probably doing myself a little disservice because I bet there's probably an outlet not so far from where I am right now that I could be employing to feed my phone 85%. That's not too bad, but I don't like to dip. I like to always be dipping and sipping, my dude. If you're gonna dip, you gotta sip. So yeah, second Starbucks was a good success. It was nice to tend to those needfuls and then get back on the road for a final push to another Starbucks. And there, so I guess that brings me to another thing that happened today that's worth mentioning, which is that I was kind of thinking about things at a certain point. I felt like I had a confrontation with my ego today, because I was kind of like thinking about the fact that, I'm a small part of the puzzle of the world, very small part. And especially with my AI aspirations, not that I'm abandoning them in any sense of that possible avenue and opportunity per se, but I was like, okay, well, let's pull back a little bit here and have a little slice of humble pie. And do remember that, like, I don't have any formal training in, meaningfully working on these systems. I'm not a systems engineer by training. I didn't go to college. I did go to college. I didn't go to college, though, for computer systems engineering or anything like that. I don't really have credentials, that should make an AI company think twice about, like, basically rejecting any application that I submit, which so far my track record has been 100% rejection, which is fine. That's just all data is good data. that means that's me putting something into a system and getting a certain type of output. It's like you either got to adjust what you're doing or you got to rethink what your goal is. And so today I was kind of rethinking my goal, and I was like, well, what do I actually like to do? And I was like, well, I like doing stuff like this. I like being on my bike. I like being in the woods. I do like being in cities from time to time. But I certainly feel most free when I'm like, hiking a trail or biking on a road. And so I was like, well, what would be some good things that I could look into as possible ways to spend my time? Because I don't have to go back to like the career that I have had in the past, like that doesn't have to be a must as part of my equation. And in fact, I wrote a poem. Well, I collaborated in the writing of a poem today with Gemini, which I thought was kind of fun. I don't know if I could find it, but if I can, I'd love to read it. It was about the words must and should, and how those things should never be a part of your vocabulary for yourself or for others. But I don't know if it's going to be something that was saved. I don't even know how to find it. Friendly greeting exchange. Oh, maybe it's here. Oh, is this it? Oh, wow, I found it. Okay. Well, let me read this. I'm glad that I found it. So this is called The Vocabulary of Grace. The words we use, a gentle art, to build a life and mend the heart. But two stern sounds have held the floor, that we won't speak to self anymore. No whispering should when sunlight streams, to judge our rest or waking dreams. No heavy must upon a friend, a rigid rule that has to bend. Let's trade them in for kinder rhyme, for could be nice and maybe sometime. For I will try with open hand, and what is right for you, I understand. So set them free, those prickly pair, and fill your language with soft air. The adult speaks with room to grow, in choices made and seeds they sow. Nice. Good job, AI. That's going on the fridge. But yeah, I was thinking about all that kind of stuff. And so I started looking into, like, one thing that I've always thought would be a really fun thing to do would be to work at the Appalachian Mountain Club, the AMC, I think that's what they're called, group that runs the huts in the White Mountains. Like, it would be awesome to be like a food runner, like someone who basically you have to carry 50 pounds of food, like 8 miles up the mountain or 10 miles or whatever it is, to the huts so that they can cook and stuff like that. But in my research, I wasn't able to see that they had any openings available. And from what I found out, obviously, no surprise anyway, it's a very competitive position that a lot of people want. And so maybe they're already gone. And so I was talking to AI about it, and I was like a little bit crestfallen because I was like, damn, that would be fun, but I guess I'm too late. But then I found some other things and even applied to one with the Appalachian Trail Conservancy, because I was like, well, what do I like? It's like, well, I definitely like the Appalachian Trail. I know that for sure. And so there is like this, it was like an introductory coordinator or something like that. I assume the position is for the person that I remember encountering in 2019 when I first started my northbound through hike at Amicalola, which was like some sort of a ranger that led you through some pretty basic but pretty important parts of like what you should expect the next few weeks to entail in terms of things that you probably have not had a lot of practical experience with, in terms of like leave no trace, and also bear hanging your food properly with the PCT method. And I was like, well, that could be really cool. I mean, that's like something that is certainly intriguing and probably very in line with my experience and certainly my capabilities and knowledge and things like that. And I was like, well, yeah, that would be fun. Like, first of all, it's a seasonal thing, so it's not even that much of a commitment. Plus, they do pay you, so it's not like it's like strictly a volunteer thing. So the time would be valuable. I mean, I think, honestly, what I would like to do most would be a ridge runner. And maybe I can talk to some people about how to do that. In fact, I should just make a note because, well, I actually already saw on the Appalachian Trail website that ridge running right now, it's like, it wasn't one of their listed positions. So that's possible that it's either too early for that to be posted, because those don't typically start until the spring, I think, or I'm too late. So I'll just have to keep an eye on it. But yeah, I applied to that, felt pretty good about it, excited about the idea, and that was my last Starbucks. And then I had a really nice, mostly downhill 22-mile ride to here, Palm Springs, which feels a lot more sedate now that Steve has moved on. There was another guy here earlier who was like filling water bottles, but he had an absurd amount. I really couldn't peg what he was doing or where he was from or anything about him. He was very quiet too, so I'm not entirely sure, but I'd imagine he might be gone and moved on by now. But that's really cool. Oh yeah, I got a flat tire. That was another thing. So probably from my little time that I spent today, I think it was about 5 miles or so on I-10 at some point, I went over something that had a metal splinter. Thankfully, I was able to find it while I was troubleshooting the tire. Because I have a very specific method for changing tires, because it's not a complicated or difficult. It doesn't have to be a complicated or difficult thing, but it does need to be systematic, so that when you put your tube into your tire, after you've you basically want to make sure that you're not setting yourself up for immediate failure again. And so I'm a pretty rigorous tube switcher. I go through the tire like a full external inspection, and the best way to do that is to use the valve stem as a reference, so where you've already looked, and there was nothing poking out from the outside. But then when I ran my finger, which I always do, on the sidewalls and through the middle, I found this huge metal staple, which I didn't even see from the outside. So if I had tried to put a tube in there without looking properly, it would have immediately punctured it again, and then I'd be down to just one tube, which I guess I still am down. Well, I'd have to use my last tube, which would be a bummer. I gotta pick up another tube now, because I'm a 2-tube minimum kind of guy. But that was a nice little practical time on the side of the road. It was right at sunset, at least as far as the mountains are concerned. So not quite below the horizon, but definitely sinking below the mountains. Just a pretty place to switch out a tire. I think I did it in less than 15 minutes. I didn't really pay attention, because I was just like, well, I can't go anymore unless I fix this, so time to fix it. And it went off without a hitch. This new rear wheel, which it was a rear wheel flat, the tire is a lot harder to get onto the rim, so I was a little bit concerned about possibly pinching it in that process, but thankfully that didn't happen. I did about 180 pumps, and I think my original 200 marker was for my other tires, which were a lot wider. So, a pump didn't go quite as far. But yeah, fixed all that, got rolling again, and then I showed up here and basically got gobbled up by Steve real quick. If you happen to be listening to this and are someone other than my parents, although I will take that into consideration as well, shout out to my parents, and you would like to hear the conversation with Steve, let me know, and I will consider posting it. I suppose I need some sort of a critical mass of at least 3 people, one of which would not be my parents. But yeah, that's about it, my dude. And 6:50, I got up, I don't know, close to 13 hours ago. So I'm certainly at a point where I'm excited about the idea of nestling into a cozy little nook, but I do think I'm going to eat just a little something so that, helps the medicine go down and all that kind of stuff. Nothing too crazy, just, handful of nuts and some peanut butter and some honey for sweetness. But yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and go, and I'm gonna do a little loop around here and see what the situation is now. See if it's quieted down, because I think if I can see this environment in a different light without so much stuff going on, because I got here right after it stopped, right after the place closed, and right after it actually got fully dark, and so I feel like there's been a little bit more of a transition now, especially that it's 7 o'clock, and if I can find a better spot, I will certainly take advantage of that. However, this spot really, there's been no one walking over here yet, and there's no lights, which is kind of surprising. I would think that there would be a lot of light in this general area to dissuade people like me from doing anything over here after they close, but doesn't seem to be the case. And let's see what's around the corner, shall we? I did see a nice little nook that I was considering Well, even over here is pretty nice by the air conditioning units. I don't know. The air conditioners have always been very comforting to me. I used to actually, when I lived with my parents, like in middle school and stuff, I would go and change the thermostat by 1 degree up or down, just so that it would kick on and have that white noise again. It's comforting. It's cozy. So yeah, I can definitely make something work around here. I just want to be a little bit more strategic, since I've already found out that this is an area that does host and facilitate others. I don't want to be sticking out like a sore thumb, my dude. So, I don't know. I do not know. Probably don't want to be anywhere up there. Anyway, I'll leave it there because this is probably not super engaging because you can't see what I'm looking at. Love you, and goodbye for now.